So, welcome, guys, wherever you're listening, however you're listening. Welcome to TAP, also known as the Alphabet Podcast. Now, guys, if you've been joining me for a while, you'll understand the concept. If not, we take a letter from the alphabet and we look at a current mental health issue and we try to bring it into focus. The aim is to make you guys your own therapist. So, today, guys, is something a little bit different, and it's something that is very personal to me. One of the reasons why I became a therapist was because of a lot of the mental health that I saw within my own family and my close loved ones. And it's not just the usual depression and anxiety and schizophrenia, which I'm quite used to, but I think something that people don't know a lot about and it's kind of coming more into focus is personality disorders. So you may have heard that. So we're just going to jump straight in. And what defines a personality? So if I was to define what I think of as personality, it's just like the unique characteristics that make up a person. So when we're talking about personality disorders, we're talking about people that potentially may have difficulties with the way they think, feel, and ultimately then behave. So how common are personality disorders? If you look at the stats online, I think they're quite misleading, but we'll start with that. And as much as 1 in 20 people have a personality disorder of some kind. Now, we're going to be very clear. There are more than 10 personality disorders. Some of them are subdivided, but there are around about 10 different types of personality disorder. But the personality disorder that we're going to bring into focus today is borderline personality disorder, also known as emotionally unstable personality disorder. Now, as much as people may have heard about this, I don't think people really understand the difficulties that it can provide in a person's life. And some mental illnesses are thought to result from genetic and environmental factors. But in my humble opinion, I believe emotionally unstable personality disorder in particular tends to be as a result from something stressful or traumatic. And me, as a psychotherapist that looks into the past, I'm particularly looking at the period between 0 to 5 years. I would expect to find some type of trauma or some potential issues with attachment, but not necessarily in childhood. It can be later on in life. A succession of traumatic events can change the way people respond to things. So without further ado, what is a personality disorder in this particular one? So when we're looking at EUPD, we're looking at potentially difficulty forming and maintaining relationships, potentially difficulties connecting with friends and family. Okay, so difficulty managing, controlling and regulating emotions. So hence where the emotionally unstable part. I don't particularly like the term personality disorder at all, because I think it places a particular stigma from the get-go. I know a lot of people, when they hear personality disorder, they may think about the film Split, which he has something completely different, which is like a dissociative condition. He has loads of different personalities. So it's nothing like that. So like I said, I'd expect to see difficulty forming and maintaining relationships, difficulties connecting with people, difficulty managing, controlling, coping with difficult feelings. For most people, we all respond differently to different emotions, but with an emotionally unstable personality disorder, I would expect to find particular difficulties, potentially some controlling behaviors and impulses that may be outside of the person's control. So I think there's often a perception from outside when you don't really understand, how if a person is thinking and feeling a particular way, that is going to impact their behavior. And if you don't think or feel that way yourself, it may be hard to empathize with. But I do think that all personality disorders get worse with stress. I've previously mentioned that there are around about 10 personality disorders. Some people may subdivide, making them more, but they tend to fit into 3 distinct categories. So the first category will be like feeling suspicious of people. The kind of personality disorder you'd be looking at there will be potentially a paranoid personality disorder. So they may have difficulty forming relationships. Okay. So then there's the second category, which is finding it hard to manage emotions. And that's where borderline personality and EUPD will come into it. So that could be going from positive to extremely negative emotions and often not having much in between. So we've spoken about ambivalence before, if you don't know what ambivalence means, please go back to attachment and anxiety, where I explained that a bit more. But it's just being able to have something in between good and bad, essentially. It can appear to an outsider as if the person is being quite dramatic. And certainly I would expect to see some unpredictability in this category. So the third distinct category of personality disorder would be the feeling very anxious. So here I would expect an extreme fear of being judged. So that would be like the avoidant personality disorders. But enough with the technical stuff. What does it look like in real life? This is what we need to get to, because personality disorders, because they borrow so much from other mental health conditions, they are often misdiagnosed. So going back to what I said at the beginning, it being 1 in 20, I would expect to see it to be a lot more. But it's particularly difficult to diagnose because there would have to be a distinct pattern of behavior over a period of time for that to become a possibility. So what else does it look like? So if you're a person and you're potentially worried that you may be suffering from, in particular, a borderline or emotionally unstable personality disorder, you may be experiencing upsetting thoughts. So just really upsetting, negative thoughts about yourself, thinking that you're not, worth much, which is similar to things that come up in depression. That's why sometimes there is an overlap there. But strange experiences, so maybe hearing voices outside of your head or inside your head in the form of intrusive thoughts. People often don't understand that, and people often are scared to explain that they have these intrusive thoughts. And a lot of the time with intrusive thoughts, it's not reflective of your true intentions. They are just literally thoughts that overcome your mind. But particularly, so I've gone back to saying that trauma and stress, I would expect to see some loss. If you're suffering from a borderline or emotionally unstable personality disorder, I would expect a lot of your feelings to revolve around feeling rejected, abandoned, possibly fearful. But here's where it gets a bit more dangerous and why it needs to be spoken about a lot more. There's a lot of impulsive behaviors that often go with an emotionally unstable personality disorder. And you can imagine if you're struggling to regulate and the way you think and the way you feel, you're going to behave in ways that people may not understand. So that could be self-harm behaviors. And we spoke about self-harm in depression. Self-harm is not just the cutting or scratching. It could be doing anything that's harmful to yourself. So that could involve reckless behavior, such as binge drinking, drug misuse, gambling sprees, a lot of the things that you may see in things like bipolar, which is why it's often misdiagnosed with bipolar. So if you don't know about bipolar, please go back to depression. I explain it there. But things that are not really spoken about, like unprotected sex with strangers, and that's something that can happen. So if you can imagine, if you're binge drinking and you're already feeling quite emotionally dysregulated, the misuse of drugs and alcohol, while it may seem like it's helping you at the time, it's actually going to make you feel worse. But the real place that I feel like emotionally unstable personality disorders show up is in relationships. Now, I think relationships tend to bring out the worst in all of us. Let's be honest. Where it's either parent or partner. So parent, partner, they tend to be the ones that trigger you the most. But it really shows up here. So what does that look like? So again, going back to attachment, I would expect it to be the more insecure attachment. So whether that's disorganized, avoidant, but particularly anxious avoidant. So that's the inconsistent parenting, maybe feeling rejected, having some loss. So if you've got loads of siblings, maybe not getting that attention in comparison to other siblings. But in real life, it looks a lot like problems. So it may be constantly texting or phoning a person. You have a breakup or your partner upsets you. For most people, you might take some time to cool off till you calm down. But for someone with an emotionally unstable personality disorder, that feels impossible. So if you can imagine your skin, the skin that you have, it has loads of layers. But if you can imagine in an emotionally unstable person with a personality disorder of such name, I don't like calling it that, I really don't. But, you'd expect, thinner emotional skin. So it's not that they lack empathy. So it's often, they might describe borderline personality, people with having a lack of empathy or being narcissistic. Actually, I would say it's the opposite. I would say it comes from too much empathy, feeling things too much. So feeling things for others and for yourself and feeling it more intensely than most people. So it might look like physically clinging on to a person, literally just physically clinging on. You can't leave. This is where it gets a little bit more dangerous as well. So making threats to harm yourself if they leave. And you can never, ever take for granted when someone says they feel suicidal. So even if you think that they may be being dramatic, I think you always need to take it seriously, because with someone with an emotionally unstable personality disorder, they may go from feeling very happy to feeling very down very quickly. So remember, there's not a lot of middle ground. Sometimes they may feel like others are smothering them and being controlling towards them, and that can often present as anger. So that's where the misconception is, that they're potentially volatile, or if you can imagine feeling everything all at once and how that would feel, just to feel everything and not have any protection from that. So, those are the things that we're looking at. But enough of me talking. So as you can see from this beautiful woman here, I spoke about it at the end of the last podcast, a very, very, very inspiring person who I've come across through my work with this podcast. And she's been extremely supportive. But I'm going to bring Kerry in now, so to speak for herself, because she's a wonderful person and she has a lot of positive things to add. So Kerry, with any further ado, I always say that. I don't know why I say little further ado, because that's not how I normally speak. But with little further ado, Kerry, welcome to the Alphabet Podcast. Hey, thank you so much for coming on. I know we haven't had much preparation, which in some sense is good. So it's a very organic podcast, but we've had quite a lot of discussion since we first got together through the wonder that is Facebook or Facebook to some people. So please just tell the podcast a little bit about yourself.
I'm Kerry Mussington, born and raised in Ipswich. I am a mother, a grandmother. I am now currently almost 53, have an invisible disability. So hence my disability is called emotionally unstable personality disorder. But just because I have the label doesn't mean I am not capable of thinking how to help others. By my lived experience, I give back, and I found a project called Mind Over Matter. Literally, it is a mind over matter, whatever you do in life. There's a thought for consequences and actions. I basically did it. I was fed up with the suffering, but I had grown into understanding my own behavior, my own pleas for help, my cries for help. And I've always gone through life with this chip on my shoulder. This is the good voice. Go on, go on. You're giving you a reason, looking for a reason to stay. And this voice, it's not literally hearing voices, it's the inner thoughts and your consciousness saying you're not good enough, and then looking for reasons why you are not good enough. And that caused me mental instability as far as very depressed. I was self-harming. I didn't know what to do with emotions. What I saw around me was nothing but trauma, displaced, child was in and out of relationships with the parents, separation, new people around. And life in the 70s was particularly, love thy neighbor. They were trying to uplift each other within the community because they just came over here not long. And so adapting to the community, I felt that some of us children were getting lost in the mix. I know now where my troubles have stemmed from. I'm not cured. I might be the founder and director of Mind Over Matter Suicide Prevention. I might have my credentials to help other people, all the things that society says you need, because before that they were saying US. But
And that's shocking to me. I think that's really shocking to me, but there is so much stigma around mental health, and it really does need to stop.
Yeah, this is a very long story, so I'll try to break it down in an age gap, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So we start from the beginning of my life. What I do know is that I was sexually abused by a non-family member, or you would call it the babysitter, or the father's friend, or the mother's friend. That's how the close one. That was something of a grooming process from the age of what my memory would take me back is and seeing you can have those flashbacks, and to 16. Let me go there, 16. The whole duration of my life was based around people's lifestyles, and the child being caught up in the midst of an adult world, neglect, drugs, alcohol, police, discrimination, racism, all of that going on, and underneath their nose, my parents' nose, their child was being abused. So that's what I know now, but it's taken years to think about on an age that I remember banging my head up against the wall. And I was in London at the time. Again, we've been shuffled around again. And I remember banging my head up against the wall, and I realized that siblings are also very frail. So not only are you going through an ordeal with somebody touching you in unwanted behavior that you don't even know what it is at that age, you're going through sibling abuse also, which in the shape of kids being kids, as you say, frequently put it, but there's some traumatizing stuff that go on within the children. And then when we're all displaced, we're all obviously displaced psychologically as well, emotionally, mentally, unattached to anything with no stability. Social services, police, but they're missing the children though. They don't see the children. Why? And not only are the children, I'm talking to me about myself, and not only myself suffering from self-grooming process of a dirty old man who would give sweets and stuff like that. And suddenly you're developing, you can't tell anybody. You don't even know if you should be telling. You just know that it's your little secret. So can you imagine holding all that in, but being disassociated with it, just going out of there and just plunging yourself into dancing or something like that, but then having to go back to all this abuse. So nowhere to run. I started taking things out on myself. So the banging of the head is a symptom for me, that's what I was doing when I was younger. The other things that was happening is I pretty much with boys from at a young age would be touching my body also. So these are other displaced children. And it was just, I knew something didn't feel right about people touching my body. And I remember pushing one child, and it's not funny, but when I'm looking back at it, I remember one pushing one child off a shed that he was sitting on, we was all sitting on. And I was angry inside, because I somehow, as a child, felt violated that somebody could peel over me. But I don't know it's pee. I don't know what it is. I just know it's snap. I know it's also triggering right now for some people, most probably. But there are deep secrets that were kept within myself, traumatizing things that I witnessed for, and no one to tell. No one's recognizing anything.
So you mentioned that you found a way of just dissociating or disconnecting from that experience.
Well, you're just going backwards and forwards, within this family breakup, dad's got a new girlfriend, mum's got a new boyfriend, but this man is still around as the family friend or the family helper. So that went on for years. At 13 years old, that was the first time I tried to take my life. And I had planned to take my life. I was miserable at school. Not only was I getting out of home, I'm now being bullied at school also. And then because of you having to have some kind of rank in school, you are having to accept bullying and physical fights and getting yourself, you're going to get in trouble at home if you get in trouble at school. So the consequences all right around, there's always abuse around me, constant abuse around me.
Punishment, in the form of punishment per se. And you've mentioned that your early attachments were just filled with grooming and a lot of police and a lot of addiction, just a lot of chaos.
Children's homes, detachment from the siblings, being pulled away from them, and watching those siblings also struggle with violation of their rights, really. I'm not here to keep secrets today. I'm here to keep it real in culture. Different cultures, they have a belief that they're the ones for the child, right? And that belief in the consequences of witnessing not only domestic violence, but the children are getting beaten and with weapons too. And you're hearing social services perhaps knocking at the door also, but you're hearing the parents fight back. So you come to the door again, and I'm going to do that. So it's double threat. You've got threats all the way around you, no matter where you run. So you want to go to places safety, and there's nowhere to go safe. There's nowhere safe. In the end, it's just like I feel miserable. I don't know why I feel miserable, but I feel miserable. I can't cope, crying. I'm lashing out. I'm getting bullied and racism at school as well because the color of my skin. It was multicultural in a sense. We got on. We knew where we could go. We knew where our bread and butter was. But at the end of the day, a lot of us, a lot of people that I was around, we had the same similar stories. But we only discovered that later on in life. But yeah, my first attempt of suicide was at school. And school.
Wow.
And I remember being in the hospital, and I remember my mum and dad coming up, laughing and joking, but not really understanding why a child would take their life or whatever it was. They probably think, oh, she just had a bit of trouble at school or whatever else, but it's not selling us. You don't even know you've got a secret. You're just, that's just normal, regular, out the way routine. You just don't even think, do you know what I mean? So just trying to manage, I think my first smoking of drugs, marijuana, again, was because monkey see, monkey do. You know, survival. Us kids within the community would form our own family amongst each other. And we were the ones that would share our stories but not the intimate stories like what's going on then. We were just basically the naughty children, the rejects, even our grades at school told us we weren't able to have a chance of typewriting or French or any of those because they put us in a class that was called EU, undegraded, I call that. And poverty, people, poor children, as I call it. But we're not, we're just council estate children. That's all we are. We're just selected of who is worthy and who isn't. So you've got a whole lot of subliminal message going on all around you, just trying to find your identity. And everybody wants something from you. Everybody has a request that you this way, be this way, do this, go there. Be nice to the older men and things like that coming in and everything with pies and things like that. And it was just like, can we have our own room? Can we have our own stability?
Safety. Safety comes to mind.
And it just got to the point where it was just too sad to remain, and I didn't know what was happening with me. I couldn't call it as it was. Oh, it's child abuse or sex abuse or rape. I couldn't call it what it was because I'm like, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So I'm learning what these things
are. And that's the thing about being groomed as well. It's not something that happens over a day or two. It can happen over years and years and years. And the thing about being groomed, if you're groomed particularly well, you will not know you're being groomed. Some people, even as adults that have been groomed as children, are still not able to see that they were groomed. That's how manipulative and dangerous these characters are in our society. And a lot of them will come in the form of family, friends, but sometimes even family. I would like to say to you that this is something that really shocks me, but it's something that I hear a lot of. So you mentioned all of the stuff that happened with your early attachment, which I would expect to see. What happened later on in life? Because I know that's not the end to your traumatic experiences.
No, then the drinking alcohol came into play, allowing men to have their way as such because they put words in your mouth, make you feel special, and you already feel that your body is subjected to their beck and call because that's what's been shown to you. And you realize all you search for is someone to actually accept you. But each time you encounter relationships, you either get called the N word, you find out that there's troubled children and they're probably blue sniffing. And I remember that and actually being physical on me as a female. And then to deal with care home children's home again, because I was once again, physically abused by my father, who split my head open, and I put myself into care. And I didn't know that was possible with the help of the school, because this was the day of my grandmother's funeral, so I remember this. But when it came to school, I had nowhere to run, you see what I mean? Because my neighbour tried to take me in, and my dad had threatened her. And all the time, my dad's trying to keep me safe from the outside world and trying to prevent me from going over the park to be around boys and stuff like that as a younger generation. He doesn't know that underneath his underneath his breath, he's got a perpetrator, basically there every day. So, gosh, it's incredible when I look back at the survival of children. So we move into children's home, and in the children's home, I know, in a sense, I think I got pregnant and wanted a baby and things like that, but that wasn't successful. But you just hang around with other girls who are trying for babies because they just want someone to love them. Yeah. It was then I went on to older men, and it was the American life. There was a base nearby, and we're in the 80s now, and this American military is a whole big life, but it's full of alcohol. Mm-hmm. It's full of alcohol and cigarettes, and you're underhead. And basically, they call you jailbait. But some of those men just didn't care. They would bother you in with bits and bobs. And I remember my first, again, attempting to self-harm because of rejection or getting the one and the attention, because I felt used and abused or whatever else. But I remember starting to self-harm, where I would make myself bleed and drink and this, that, and the other. And then I found myself pregnant at 17, but before the pregnancy, at 7, apologise, that's not the truth. Let me go back. I'll get over that. Okay, so I found myself pregnant at 17 and not knowing really what pregnancy is. I'm not even at home. I'm actually living in a woman's refuge. Wow. And I'm 16, nearly 17 years old, right? 17 years old. And I'm in a woman's refuge on my own around other women in there and children that are actually teaching me also how to walk. So I'm getting in the criminal world.
In the criminal justice system.
And I'm not accepting that I've got a baby inside me either, and I am drinking alcohol. And I'm still going out there partying, and I'm just wrecked. I don't know how I got to keep my child, but I know my mother intervened at that point. She was there at my birth. But basically, instead of teaching me how to be a parent, I felt she took over. Then I had nothing. What am I here for? Yeah. You're making me feel worthless. I think that's a mistake that parents make. They take over rather than teach. And you're trying to learn from them in a sense, and you think, well, you didn't protect me, did you? But you're not thinking that way. You're just realizing, what am I going to do with this little thing? And I called it's a boy. I didn't want a boy. I love my kids now, don't get me wrong, do you know what I mean? But, that I'm just like, I didn't know what to do. And I see my mum and dad give so much love to my grandchild and grandchild. It was like, who are you people? Why didn't I feel that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I felt, again, unloved, rejected. You've taken over the only thing that I named that I could call my own. And, well, then I'm going out. No bonding with the child, really. So I struggled, because then I ended up, from the woman's refuge, they put me into a hostel. So here's the pattern. So going into a hostel, and I remained there in this hostel, scared of my own parents, because they started to say, if you don't send the baby, I'm going to come and be you. And I got set up on the threats, fed up of everybody just wanting something from me, siblings not really liking me much and things like that. Just never really, I never felt loved. Do you know what I mean? Never felt loved. Towards the end, I know I was loved, you know. I mean, I know I was loved. It's not their fault they didn't see. Or, sorry, they could be accountable for education. But again, if we look back at them, how much were they educated? My mum and dad. My mum was 14. She was with my dad. There was a little bit of an age gap, but back then they didn't see it too long when you're younger.
Yeah.
You know, now it is. There's more protection for younger children now. So it was torment. I found myself self-harming, bleeding, drink, alcohol, still not holding down a relationship. Never, I didn't want to really give. I always found that the men cheated on me because they never really liked me. I was just a mate too.
Yeah.
That's how I. So after that, my mum had my child for a while until I met my first husband. I didn't like him. I was on a rebound. I was on a rebound from somebody I really, really liked, and then found out that like 8 months of a relationship, he had been a liar. So I was living this lie throughout, and I did not. So I went off with the next man, and the one who he'd like me, yeah. And I got pregnant, and I thought, well, I will try.
Yeah.
I will try. But it was neither here or there because I began. He became an abuser as soon as I landed in the US of A. My parents, I'm not with my parents or nothing. I was pregnant when I left here to go and have the baby over the US of A. And when I was pregnant, I left. No, I didn't. I was pregnant, gave birth, and within a few weeks later, I'm trying to commit suicide.
Wow.
No, not that I didn't love my baby. I was breastfeeding. I felt just completely numb. I didn't like the man that I was with. He was a bully, and I was trapped in a country that
Sounds like it. That's what came to my mind when you said that, the feeling of being trapped.
Yeah, and I know I loved this little boy because he was just beautiful and just, wow, he was amazing, incredible, but I didn't, I need to go home. No matter what, I have to go home. And I went home and I see the love for my first child, where my mum and dad were first child, but the second one, I see a little bit of, you're not really taking him, man. You know what I mean? But he's mine. He's ready. No say so in this one, but he's mine. Yeah. And then I got my first, I came back to a property because I remember getting my first property and just trying to be a parent with 2 children now. And I'm not even 20 yet, am I? And I'm dealing with mental health. And I don't know it's mental health. I don't know it's depression. I don't know anything. I know I'm tearful. I know I'm always feeling suicidal. I'm always feeling miserable. And I try to grasp a little bit of happiness, but it doesn't last very long.
It sounds absolutely heartbreaking.
When I came back at 21, I met a wonderful person. And I ended up having a lovely relationship with him for about a couple of years. He was an older man again, and I got pregnant again. And that was
sorry to stop you just there, but just something that came up. So you mentioned a couple of times about the older male. Do you think that's come as a result of maybe the lack of relationship that you potentially had with your own father?
Yes, absolutely. What you want from your father is not really there. He's incarcerated or he's unavailable. You know, well, my dad was quite well known. Do you know what I mean? But if he's unavailable, where we're not getting that emotional connection as such, then you do. A girl wants their daddy. A girl wants their daddy. You know.
And that does cause a lot of problems for a lot of women going forward in relationships, especially in terms of, because it's your father that gives you that first validation. that whole mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? You would normally get that validation from your father telling you you're a princess or you're the most beautiful girl in the world. And if you can imagine having that throughout your childhood, it actually validates you. So if you've actually lacked that validation, this is what I would expect to see. My father passed away at quite a young age, and I know that I've had some issues with being validated by men, but I just appreciate your openness. So you've mentioned that it's caused you issues in your relationship, stopped you from bonding with your child. You've mentioned the first time that you tried to take your own life being only 13, which to me is just absolutely heartbreaking. What kind of other difficulties as living with this mental health condition that you, at this point, you don't know you have presented for you in your life?
Yeah. So it's a pattern of men, to me, have violated my body over and over again, perhaps violated my emotions and false promises and disappointment. So yeah, there's been a lot of violations for me, even to the point where I'm having to live with the fact that I'm date raped. I've been date raped as well, and that is just
Um,
like,
sorry,
who
just
can
for
believe
those of
you?
you that don't know what date rape is, that is rape by somebody that you know. Because a lot of people, when they think of
I
rape,
don't know.
yeah, don't, or don't know. Yeah,
Don't
but
know.
they have this perception that being raped means being dragged off into a bush, but actually it can also be done by people that you trust. And sometimes you may not even be aware that that's the case. So it's a big issue of consent as well. But sorry, continue. I didn't mean to.
They had put something in my drink which
Yeah.
locked me out, and I woke up in an attic and stuff like that. And it's just like, wow, you know what I mean? Who's going to believe you? Will anyone believe you? I know, but will anyone believe you? I've got bits and bobs and stuff like that, and I don't think you can ever comprehend you like self doubt it. You know what I mean?
Doubting
Will
yourself.
not believe you. And actually, I did challenge the person what I thought. And at the time, I remember just being aggressive and telling me to F and do one really.
Gaslight in your experience, which is quite common. I would expect that person to be quite narcissistic.
Yeah. When I left America and came back to England, my life changed a little bit more. Got more friends. My friends are back. I'm just happy and bubbly. And behind closed doors, I'm perhaps sad and moving on. For some reason, can't connect to the person. I found the reason why I should push him away, and goes the other way. So gambling became another problem. Drink, gambling, and didn't care two feelings about anybody's feelings but my own. I was doing all right as a parent. I had to fight for my first child in court. Imagine having to go to court for my child at the time, because I didn't believe that when I had the third one. I didn't believe that I should separate them all. I think, I know I want a family. I want a family. So all I ever want is a family.
Yeah.
And so that was my aim. I wanted my family. And so I got my child. That was painful, having to challenge my parents in court and look at myself and say, and I said to the judge, well, they didn't teach me how to be a parent. I've had to learn the hard way how to parent. They didn't teach me. They took over. They plunged what they should have plunged in me. They plunged my grandson. I won my children, and I shaped my life. I had a home. I then met my husband, and I conformed, and I stripped my personality to nothing. Behind closed doors, I was still with the pattern of behavior, self-harming, drinking, being a victim of abuse.
More abuse.
More abuse, more domestic abuse, more control, actually ostracized from my own culture, being called names because I married a white man, and being called names, publicly humiliated, ashamed. All of that played another impact on my life, and I did not bear it anymore. So once again, I took it in. I won't. I tried to take my life, and I'll never forget here. I could hear. I knew the ambulance had come, and I could hear, just like my sister calling me a selfish bitch. I've disappointed someone again. Yes, again, I've disappointed someone again. And so apparently I was near to death.
Wow.
And only to come back out and carry on living a miserable life with more conditions and more restrictions and isolated and publicly, like I said, shamed, humiliated. Well, anyway, it got to the point where Tina Turner came on telly. What's love got to do with it?
Wow.
And
That's a powerful
I
film.
watched that, and that's the first time I actually understood what domestic abuse was,
Wow.
and that control and the power of prayer. And one day I just said, because I was embarrassed when I had to get permission if I could go out to dinner with my friend.
Wow.
And I was embarrassed. And I literally left and got out with that. So it's not even got out with that. I got out with that with an injunction. Do you know what I mean? Put it that way when it came to blows. But I remember, even though you're self-harming, being suicidal and actually doing the action, no one's actually investigating what is going on in your home or in your background. They just said, I feel poorly. Why are you depressed? And each time they would give you, it's like before you leave the hospital, they want to give you an assessment. So they bring in a psychotherapist. Is that the right word? Yes, psychotherapist. And you lie. I'm all right. See, and they're quick to just get you off the book. So they don't indulge in anything. You can just have your stomach pumped or whatever else, and they will not indulge into what's going on in your life. We're going to give you secondary mental health care. None of that. The stigma there was being put in the mental health ward in a white jacket so you would avoid the honest conversation. And I will never forget the fact when domestic abuse make you leave that relationship, get into another, and it's a common pattern where these abusers are picking you because you're so vulnerable, you're so nurturing, you're so good, but they see a weakness in you somehow. Where you're just going to keep nurturing rather than getting you back, you'll be kind of pretty. When I got out with that, it was they put me on a freedom program to understand. No, sorry, I'm trying to recall.
Okay. No, trauma has that effect on a lot of people. It's actually, it has effects on your memory as well.
I'm just trying to leave that scene to go into the next one. Basically, it was a police officer. As much as I didn't like police officers because I was similar to my parents, so we're not going to confide into them. I was similar to my brother's stops and search the roadside and things like that. And the discrimination was all kept thinking they weren't picking on my family. But when I had left that relationship, it was only due to the plea. I decided, because of Tina Turner, to fight back. And I said, I'm going to call the police. And it was a threat more than call the police. And I was just like, I've got nothing else to lose. I'm going to lose my life. I'm going to lose. Someone's going to lose something here because I'm raging here. I can't keep taking this abuse. And my child had witnessed. And that's the thing. I thought, oh no, you're not from my children. And just, I did do the police. I was encouraged to do the police. And they took me to a domestic violence unit. And it was the first time I was able to be heard, seen, and listened to. The lady gave me so much information on how to get injunction and what to do. And you're living in the property, which is a bought property now. And yeah, at the end of the day, now you're going to fight over the collateral of the property. The legal system was completely unfair. Here I am, a mother with 3 children, with one of them standing in behind, which is what I gave permission to do anyway. With that, such a good bond. And I just lost my home. So, into the relationship, losing my home, everything that I had from 18 years old. Here I am now at 20, I don't know, 30 years. I spent 12 years there, 12 years with that. And then losing my home and having the judge, the person that I would thought would look at the children and know that this man has 2 properties here. Let him have one. Let me keep what I went homeless. I'm a homeless room. I survived
Some more loss. So you've lost this relationship.
that, lost my son, and I'm now homeless with 3 kids and now having to go backwards. I start all over again and wait for another accommodation. During this homelessness, I met this individual. I spent another 2 years being another victim. But this time, my mind decided to shut down on me. And because I was being a victim in the same instance before I lost that property, before I was thinking trying to get rid of the property, but before I lost that home, I was a victim again. 2-year relationship, again, somebody of colour, and my mother was white, my dad black, so I don't see an issue with complexion. That's the way it'll all up, you know what I mean? But the cruelty was just unbelievable. Domestic where whittling my brain down, blackmail, this, and I can't tell my children that it's happening when every time I go visit, I go over to the house, his house, and it's happening behind closed doors. I'm also getting my drink dropped now, and on the drink dropping stuff, and I was against taking those kind of ecstasies. I was against taking that, but vodka was a problem. And I didn't know that back then, I do know now. But because I'm with a person that's violent, that is an alcoholic, that has an issue with women, being women, I'm experiencing violence all over again. Only this person whittled me where I was barricading myself in. I was a hostage in his home. I had called, the police had come, and they failed me. And I'll tell you why they failed, because I called the police. I'm in fight of my mind is always like, okay, I'm going to end this, I'm going to end my life. Mean that, all right, let me try and do the right thing, or what can I do to feel safe from, and still not tell anybody nearest to me, but feel safe in this world. So I called the police. What happened though is that the police arrested me as well as that individual, which is quite common that I didn't know that, but I had such a fear. I went into a big anxiety panic attack, makes me feel 10 times as worse. Then I'm irritated with my brain and I just go crazy.
Yeah, the police have that effect on a lot of people. They don't particularly really
They
understand.
pins me down in that cell after I've just been beaten, after I've just been battered and bruised. I'm not going to go into the depths of that. And I called them and they heard him say, get up them stairs or I'll kick you again. But they pulled me in, took the children, and the toppers asked me to take off my clothes. And I thought, why? What have I done? Why? Well, I called you for help. And they decided to pin me down, cut off my underwear. I'm violated again. And I was so traumatized. I just shut down and shut down.
Absolutely horrific.
And he came back and he became my stalker. And I couldn't take it anymore. I drunk, silly. And my brain just said, well, everybody thinks you're pretty. It's like keep pulling you in with the prettiness. And I actually went for my face for the first time. I went to harm myself in a horrible manner whilst somebody else was present. So it must have been very traumatizing for them. I didn't care. Police had got involved. And they came on a 1 precinct, we'll explain that, 1 precinct into the mental health act to take me away. So I was bundled in the back of a van.
Wow.
And taken to the mental health place. Safe. Not the hospital, a place of safety. So, and you notice that was particularly how I worded it. Okay. I am then in my worst nightmare. I'm in a mental health ward. All the times I've been asking you guys for help, and now I'm in a mental health ward. And I'm in a little cubicle. I know white stray jackets, not what I thought. And I just had people trying to calm me down, but my mind had switched off. And I'm numb, and I still have suicide on my head.
So this brings it nicely into it. So you'd had this pattern of abuse going on since as early as the 70s. So all throughout the 80s, and I can imagine some of the 90s. But it wasn't until 2004, so that's 19 years ago now, that you actually received a diagnosis. So just tell the podcast a bit about your journey to a diagnosis, because I can imagine, because I've said it already, that personality disorders and EUPD in particular share a lot of traits with other common mental illnesses. So was there an element of misdiagnosis before you got the correct diagnosis?
Actually, they were reluctant to help me. Don't recall being on any medication, any antidepressants or anything like that, because I didn't know what it was. I remember my mum telling me later on, go to the doctors, let's follow procedures, and explain to them that you're quite tearful. I think you've got depression. Well, she had it herself. And what I had known from my mother is that she had what they call manic depressive, which has changed the name, right?
Yeah, bipolar.
Thank you. But it wasn't called that back in the day. So you're not educated about that and wondering if that's hereditary. When I realised my mum was also a self-harmer, she was also a self-harmer. My mum, when I look back, was also institutionalised voluntarily for herself, for some respite, she called it. But I didn't know where she was going.
Yeah.
She just said she's going on holiday for a little while. And when I ended up in there myself, and yeah, it's very scary because there were people in there much worse than what I was. Well, I thought they were just zombied out. A lot of people with marks on their bodies and things like that. And really terrible when neither of us talking to each other because we just think, oh, you're mental. And you're mental. You're an it. You're not a living. So it's just like, who is mental? What does mental look like?
That's a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah. What does mental look like?
It's often invisible. A lot of people are struggling and people are not aware. So like you're wearing your lanyard there, invisible disability. So guys, when you're seeing these things, not everything is visible. So stop thinking that you can spot things, because a lot of people struggle with a lot of things. And for the most part, keep it under wraps so you never know. So just refrain from that judgment, because we do have a lot of invisible disabilities. So you're on this ward now and you're around other patients that, considering what you're going through, they're showing worse signs of mental health. So being in this situation and probably being quite fearful, and how have I ended up here?
And just want to say that what I look back at now, how the perpetrator gets to visit you in there to observe your state of mind that they broke down.
Wow.
Okay?
So you're violated once again.
Violated again, no place is safe. And then I remember walking back with, we're gonna see you again or whatever else. Remember walking back and subdued. Still nobody's talking to me. Still nobody's telling me what's wrong with me. Why did I feel like this? How do I manage these emotions? How do I do it? Everybody wants so much from me. And I don't even remember, and then losing my parents and stuff like that to add on there. I ain't got a diagnosis yet. But I ain't got it yet. So I get this time, I say
2004. 2004. Yeah.
What does that make me? Oh gosh. I don't know how old I am. I can't get back.
53. So you're born in around about 1970?
70.
So in 2004, you would have been 34.
Thank you. I can't do the maths. That's 34.
I knew working in a betting shop would come in handy one day.
I know I make reasonable justice use couplet. Yeah, I got that diagnosed again after just desperately going to the doctors who says, "Oh, I'm going to give you secondary mental health care," and I'm just like, "Okay, well, what's that? Let me wait on a waiting list for that." And you're managing and managing, but you're not because you're in a crisis. And so for services are involved now, okay, because not only have you had domestic abuse in your home, you're being told that if you get back with that anybody, you are going to lose your children. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, well, I'm not losing my children, but in a sense, you're now being told again what you can and cannot do in life. And I remember getting the diagnosis, and it takes two people to do the diagnosis. But you see a psychiatrist, they said, "Oh, you got this based on my background." I mentioned my parents, the history of parents, what I saw. I mentioned nothing but trauma when talking to the psychiatrist. Uh, I mentioned that I have intrusive thoughts. I hurt myself. They would ask me, "Do you drink?" I would say yes. And they'd ask me the amount. I said, "Well, if I'm angry, I don't drink."
Yeah, and that's very honest.
I binge drink. I like to party. So anytime there was me going out, I'd always drink before I got out because I couldn't deal with the outside well.
Yeah,
I would always drink because I just knew I could be in safety, put a protective barrier up, and literally cuss down anybody.
Yeah,
That's I get my reputation, which
yes.
wasn't a good reputation. It was a more like, don't mess with her. She put you in a place. I do it with Batman, I do it with lingo. So you become, where where the boundaries are with me. I started to
100%.
defend myself. But defending myself cost me a little bit of, you know, always involved with the police. The police said, "Oh, it's you again. You're such a troublemaker, ain't you? He can please take me out, not me, because I'm laughing and I'm joking and I'm
And that's a
being
big,
rowdy."
that's a big difficulty.
So drinking a lot, gambling, but giving away my stuff too. Always want to help people. Always want to feel people feel better. Always give them my time. But deep down, I'm just always like, why are they hanging out with each other and don't want to hang out with me? So I feel like people have been sneaky behind my back and things like that. And I'm not really got friends who are honest and trustworthy and things like that. So I'm like, just hanging out with people and just wanted to get drunk. And when I realised we all have problems with that, this diagnosis, they wanted to give me some medication, but in the end, some experiment medication.
Wow.
And I refused to be a guinea pig. I said, "I'm not doing experimental."
Don't blame you.
No, but they give me the common one, which is sertraline or citalopram or some other things, and diazepam on top of these things as well. So I felt I was completely zombied up all the time. I was one way or the other. I'm like, okay, I'm getting fat here, or I'm putting on weight here, and I've lost my appetite. I don't want to wake up. I want to sleep all day. I don't want to interact with the world until it's the weekend, so I can just get my mask on and get out there and have a good time and then go back to the same old routine.
So there you go. Once again, it's using medication to skirt over things. So you might not be feeling all of these different emotions now, but actually you're not feeling much of anything. You're saying you don't want to get out of bed. And so this is the side effects to just treating mental health conditions with medication.
Not wanting to wash, not wanting to deal with people. I've been in my pajamas for days sometimes. And when the mental health was bad, the one thing that I had to do is pass my child over to his dad. And he said, "He'll be all right. Look, you're just getting well. I'm here, oh God." And then the reassurance that I got, he said, "Just get yourself better." And I had to let go and do right by my child and give my child some stability whilst I got prepared. So I had about a month of trying to rebuild myself to some kind of stability. But it's been trauma after trauma after trauma. So here I am, I've got a blinking diagnosis now. They go, "Here you go, you've got EUPD." Or what's that? Emotionally unstable personality disorder. Okay, here's some tablets. Goodbye. What the
and
friend for
and
me? What the hell? What are
still
these
no
words?
still no
How is
real
that a
understanding of
cure?
what's going on.
No idea. What? How is it a cure? What? So just give me tablets and that cure, and then obviously you're not getting many pamphlets about this back then. You don't get anything. You just get this label, and you just don't know what it means for you. Okay.
And that's important, the
Oh,
label. And that leads on
yeah.
to what I was going to say to you. Do you feel like sometimes the diagnosis can be part of the main part of the stigma? Because like you
Yeah.
said, you've now been given this diagnosis, you've got this condition that you know nothing about. You've been handed a few pamphlets, and I would suggest that it's not much better now. Um, so where does that leave you? And what stigmas has that presented to you now you have this diagnosis? How
So
does that
now,
actually help?
so now then, when you want the place or you want to discuss something, you've always got out. Have you got mental health? Have you got mental health? Why? I'm telling you about this, and you're questioning my mental health. So what I found was being a victim. I'm victimized all over again because now I've got a label because I was a victim. So I wear that perpetrator's damn scars if you're under me for the rest of my life because you're never going to remove a label. So that label reminds me of all the damage people have done to me.
Yeah.
That's what it reminds me of.
Yeah.
Yes, I self-sabotage. I'm self-sabotaging because I was a child inside who still feels like a child inside, unable to grow because people are mean. You give people your heart and they go and they stand on it and you lose trust all over again. Trust today. You're actually for me.
Yeah.
I'll just use as a friend. Do you know what
Yeah,
I
and
mean?
I think that's important for people, especially with people with emotionally unstable personality disorder, but not just EUPD and BPD. Anyone with any kind of attachment, trust is going to be a big thing in kind of healing. So it's important that the relationships that you have are built around a strong foundation of trust.
And we're reading you all the time. We're reading the energy. We identify me energy. That is the emotional side of it.
It's the empathy side of it also. It's the empathy
Exactly.
side of it also. You have a lot of empathy, which is why I'm just going to quickly step in because we spoke about this and you did say to me, Lee, I want you to make it clear that borderline personality and EUPD is not the same as being narcissistic because that's something that is often thrown as a stigma. You've got BPD, you're a narcissist. Maybe when you've had a relapse and you're in the middle of a crisis, you might not be able to take on board everyone else's feelings, but it's far from narcissistic. So what I thought I would do for the podcast, even though I'm not going to go into depth about narcissistic personality disorder. So that's one of the 10 that I mentioned before. But I will give you like a little anagrams. If you write down the page special me, so we'll start with S. So when we're talking about narcissistic personality disorder and narcissistic people, and I will say we all have narcissistic traits. Not everyone with narcissistic traits has a narcissistic personality disorder, but going with the anagram special me, we'll start with S. So a sense of self-importance. P, preoccupied with power, beauty, or success. You'd expect to see that with narcissistic people. E, for feeling entitled. So that's it, that entitlement. So they're brought up to be conditioned to believe that they are special, and that continues into adulthood. So the C, they can only be around people who are important or special. That's what narcissists tend to do, as well as some of the abuse that they perpetrate. They like to surround themselves with powerful or people that they see as up there. So I, for interpersonally exploitive for own gain, I'm going to change that and say manipulative. If you're thinking what I mean by that, you'd expect to see a lot of manipulation with narcissists, which is why narcissists often will tell your family stories about you and be believed. A for arrogant. Now, a certain amount of arrogance could be attractive, but too much arrogance, potentially some problems there. Now, the real distinct thing, real difference between someone with an emotionally unstable personality disorder and someone with a narcissistic personality disorder will be the lack of empathy. Narcissists are famed for lacking empathy. They're not able to see the world through anyone else's eyes. And most of the time, they don't care to. Someone with an emotionally unstable personality disorder thinks and feels everything more intensely. So they have more feelings and more empathy to a certain degree. So now we're on to M. So they must be admired. they have this sense of self-importance and they want to see that thrown back at them. So they want to be admired. Oh, you're so great. You're so wonderful. Probably you're not. And finally, E for envious of other people or believe that others are envious of them. So that's just that belief that we all want to be you. It's just that real sense of self-importance. So once again, I will say that we all have narcissistic traits. And as I was going through that, I was actually thinking of celebrities, and highly successful people tend to have a lot of narcissistic traits, which is why they're so successful. So to a certain degree, narcissistic traits are not all bad, and not all narcissists are bad or psychopaths or sociopaths, but it's the behavior that is problematic, and it's very different to EUPD. So I hope that's cleared that up for the listeners, and I hope that suffices, Kerry.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful, because I often get names chucked at me, and I believe what I do in life is saying no. I have learned to say no. And that no has been very frightening, to be honest about how I feel about someone's conduct or behavior. And I started to learn to say no
That's
and
brilliant.
try to give myself a sense of, you don't get the right to treat me like this. And what actually I think was a saving grace, that I wasn't insane and it was other people, was the Freedom Program, which teaches around abuse, domestic violence, power and control. That was a big eye-opener for me, because it taught me about people's behavior towards me that I may have been experiencing in the past. And so I was empowered more of, yo, man, this is my fault.
And that's very important, because a lot of the time it's that self-blame and that everything's my fault and those negative thoughts that go through your head.
And it's what I have allowed, though. I've accepted this behavior in my life that is detrimental to my mind.
But you've never had healthy boundaries set for you, because that sounds a lot like boundaries. So that kind of leads it on. So you've not really had much help, outside help, but you obviously found a way to navigate your difficulties, because you're out there in the community with all your different projects doing things positive. If someone out there is listening and they're hearing this, they may think they may potentially have a personality disorder, BPD or EUPD, or maybe even one of the others, and they're family members who, I think the family often get left out when it comes to mental health, but it has a ripple effect on the family unit. So if there's anyone listening that think they may have a personality disorder and maybe struggling to navigate it, and family members struggling to understand, what kind of things have you done to navigate it and to help yourself? And what kind of advice would you give? Because today you're the expert. No psychiatrist, no doctor, no therapist that reads books or studies is going to be able to explain EUPD like you. So what can we do to help?
Mm. I went on education, so I learned to how to build up my self-esteem. So I have tried anger management. Well, it was like an unusual setting, because I was around men and women, so I'm hearing different stories. And again, I'm still like, do I actually want to be next to men as we violate women? You know what I mean? So it becomes another trigger. So I did the anger management. I did the Freedom Program. I've done, I call Dribble and Scribble Club. I'm sorry. And they want to put me on the recovery program, which I find going through the mental health services for their, what you call, recovery program, which every now and again, it's like going to need some assistance, because I'm not sure. This is something I have to live with. This is something I can do better or try better. I can only deal with the day. Grasp a happy moment in the day. See what my days look like, you know, but I've been on, tried to sort of go down that road of recovery and take classes, whether it's drawing or art. I tried it. I'm doing anything to better and get rid of the intrusive thoughts out of my head and manage my emotions. I'm trying that, but I'm also trying to be a parent. I'm also trying to be a friend. I'm also trying to be a girlfriend. I'm also trying to be a bank. I'm also trying to be, I was working as well. So I'm trying to sort of manage a job. Now, that's the last straw. When your own boss violates you after working, and I know how, I'll bring in the money I've got, just believe in me. And your boss violates you and tells you you're not good enough, because you have stood up to their behavior also. So I recognise behaviour, and I started to recognise behaviour. But I think what turned it around for me, I thought, listen, I'm a mum. I had fed up being in trouble with the police. I'm fed up of having a bad reputation. I'm fed up. I need to be mad. You know what? I've just got rid of that crappy relationship and I'm going out. And I get arrested for not hitting someone.
Wow.
I get arrested for swearing. I decided not to fight back. Probably the first and the last time that I didn't fight back. And I allowed someone, I didn't allow them, they struck me in the back of my head. And I decided, okay, well, I'm going to go and tell the police. I'm not going to hit the man. I'm going to tell the police. I'm going to tell the security guards, whatever else I'm going to do. And I'm a woman of colour approaching a white police officer. And I said, can you help me, please? I've just been struck in the head and I'm panicking. I'm full of anxiety. I've just been struck in the head. So you don't even know where my head state is. The next minute, he says, if you swear again, that's part of the condition is swearing, letting you know what's wonderful.
Yeah.
And they don't get it. So that's in my care plan.
That's very, very common.
Swearing is common.
Yeah, I've known people that I know that have emotionally unstable personality disorder to actually, in order not to get into trouble, have actually called the police. And because there's no understanding of certain of behaviors that's involved, actually been arrested for being abusive, when actually you're trying very hard not to break the law. Where's the understanding? But I do think that comes from a lack of knowledge. I don't think the police have much clue about mental health. And I think GPs are pretty along the same lines, which is why there's a lot of misdiagnosis around personality disorders.
So this is where I basically realised you're telling me in court now. You haven't done the girl that hit me. You haven't caught the culprit that hit me because you were too fixed on me swearing and being erratic. Now, this is part of the problem with mental health that the agencies or the police don't recognise, as you say, they see erratic behaviour. It's an invisible illness. So they just see somebody who may be drunk or disorderly or acting irrationally, or the judgment is there, right?
I've known of instances of police threatening to taser someone that's going through a mental health crisis rather than actually get them the help they need.
Well, I was bundled in the back of the car so fast and given a criminal record because I did not. I acted differently for the first time. I acted differently. I didn't do it with aggression back. I actually went for a crime and I was violated again by the police. And this time I'm up in court. And one of the things is she's got mental health. Oh, right. Okay. And this is that in the dialogue of your history or whatever else. And you then put on probation. How embarrassing. I'm a mum and I'm on probation for not being a woman. Okay, so I'm on probation, but in probation, the pros and the cons is, yes, it's embarrassing. Yes, again, there's little, you've got younger people in there and you're old, you've got all kind of mix of people in there, to be honest. And I am getting education in there, though. I'm getting maths in there. I'm getting English in there before I can even read anything. And I never really had to go out of public. I was in the building, so that took off the shame away. But everything now is, she's got mental health. She's got mental health. It's almost like it's our fault.
Yeah, it's almost used as a term to devalue anything you say. So it's almost like someone has mental health and they can't be relied upon to be telling the truth. They can't be the victim of something. They have to be the perpetrator because they have mental health and they're seen to be behaving erratically. But actually, with a personality disorder, we've already established that it affects the way how you think, feel, and then behave. So there's thinking and feelings that are going on before it gets to this behavior. So that lack of understanding and that reaction to criminalize someone for having mental health is very, very, very damaging. What other advice would you give to potentially family members of someone? I got a question from someone that I know, and it said, when you're in the middle of potentially relapsing and going through those really intense emotions, are you aware that what you're doing is unhealthy, or are you not aware at that time?
Yes, I am. I am aware. It's called self-sabotage. And I know I have the power to self-sabotage. I know I have the control. It's the only thing that nobody else has control over. They can control my body, but they can never control the mind. So I can put my mind to whatever I choose to put it towards because I learned them unhealthy coping strategies.
Yeah.
So in a sense where I can say, oh, I know I don't want to feel like that anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. When something is so intense, I can't help but intrusive thought. I can't. It's a cry for help. Hey, this feels uncomfortable right now. They're picking on me, or this is happening. Maybe I'm online cyberbullied, or maybe someone's calling me names or writing derogatory things about me. Again, it's another survival tactic because your reputation, everything is a reputation. And so far, your reputation has been nothing. You see? It's been a month to the people that need to know on a need to know basis, but it's been a reputation to everything else you've just seen as whatever, many labels. And I just think that throughout life, these many labels and conforming to people and taking the blame for things that should never have been my blame. And I think colour plays a big part of that.
Yeah, of course it does.
With mental health. And I'm not saying that, for my research at the end of the day is that the people that I come across with emotionally unstable personality disorder or BPD, borderline personality disorder, same thing, about the emotions, they all go, there isn't anybody that tells me they don't have intrusive thoughts, they don't want to end their life, and then tell me what the trauma is. They always tell me the back history of it. So what I do now is, what is the immediate issue today?
Yeah.
It isn't what you went through when you was a child, not necessarily because you will disassociate from that part, but you will try to navigate through the crowd to try and fit in, or sometimes you might try a little bit and then that's too dangerous out there in that world, and you retract back again for a couple of days, but you might try again, get knocked back again. I just don't know how many people that don't keep getting the knockbacks just because they got this label. Do you know what I mean? They get the hard time. They get the hard times with housing. They get the hard times with the medical. They get lied upon. They get things twisted. They don't even get justice.
So how can we help? How can we help? You've done so many things because you're out here living your life. I know earlier on in the day, you'd gone to Norwich for the day to meet a friend. Every time I speak to you, you're doing something. So is that an important part, like keeping busy?
I look busy. Doesn't mean to be busy. I can look busy. I can pretend to the world that I'm busy, but I might tell you on another day. So you never know the date that I'm on unless I'm on a live. And if I'm normally on a live, that's because I've got to tell you that.
I'm just thinking for family members who maybe not know as much about personality disorders as I do and have a family member, what can you do?
Okay, so first of all, if we was to get a list of a bucket and say, well, I want to remember what's the top priority in your bucket right now that's really bothering you. It can be a simple thing as, I'm losing my home. I've been given a section 21 when the landlord just wants the house back. What am I going to do? I've just lost my boyfriend, or I've just lost my dog, or I've just lost my job. Oh, I'm struggling with alcohol. It could be any excuse, anything. Someone's pressurized me to something like that. When we learn to talk openly and honest about our own mental health, because nobody is immune from these emotions, except for it was not discussed. You find that your siblings don't want to talk about their own mental health. They want to be the protectors and the big ones. You'll find that your parents probably won't want to talk about their mental health. And it wasn't talked about back then. It just wasn't. And again, a different level of women were seen and not heard, or women had to support. So when we're moving into this day and age now, what we're looking at is, it's all about women, honey. It's all about who is an influencer in your life? Who is a good role model in your life? Who can you rely on in your life? If you don't have any friends or family, or you might have friends, but will you accept them? Are they consistent? Because consistency is key.
Yeah.
Are you taking your friends or your family out on a date? So I decided to date myself and try to have dates with friends because I know it's gold, something I can see. I don't want to let them down, and I hope they don't let me down. Invite, even if for some reason I can't come, give an explanation. Don't just, I don't want to. Because deep down, this I don't care attitude you explain to somebody causes more damage.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to be friends with anybody anymore, just leave them an explanation. Don't just disappear.
Yeah.
Leave them an explanation why you felt something was just a little bit impossible. Don't call them names.
Mm-hmm.
Add to the trauma. Ask how you can improve the communication and I think it's important that friends understand that you have mental health. Don't keep it a secret. Or let's change the word, because a lot of people can say, oh, everyone's got mental health. Let's change the word and say, you may suffer from depression. Now, I know when I've done research, I've gone into stores, do my research with managers and jobs, and then I don't recognize depression. I don't understand depression. How can I feel it? I said, well, hold on a minute. Can you imagine if you lost a limb, you're healthy now, and you lost a limb, how do you think you feel? Oh man, I don't know. You're going to go through change. And it's when you go for that change, you have to adjust. And when you've got to adjust, it might feel uncomfortable for you because you've never been in a situation before. And suddenly people are going to see, they're going to be looking at you to see how well you're coping in life. Everybody's judging you in life to wonder how you are, from social services to schools. So you are looked over in life about how you conduct yourself with other people, because people have the right to complain about your behavior now, which is rights that we didn't know back then, but now we have the right to complain about unwanted behavior. That's what's keeping me safe, for me teaching other people about unwanted behavior, the conduct of people's behavior. This is what keeps me safe. This is what I am telling other people now. I have basic rules, and that's the Human Rights Equality Act and against discrimination. And if you could understand discrimination to its final point, that's when you can live a life without harm. But you see, everywhere you go, someone's got something to say about you, and particularly when you get online, there's negative things that you might read. You can tell. I just want to say, just because you may never have gone to the doctors to understand your emotional needs or where you're at, doesn't necessarily mean that you understand how you're feeling. And are you lucky for not having a diagnosis? At least I can say it is a disability. I understand that now. I have abilities to help, but I know that I'm healing, I'm recovering. And each time when there's more trauma, that just makes it 10 times to recover, harder to recover, more tighten up my circle, lose friends. I can count how many friends I've got, not many other, but I can count who's been stable in my life, who understands my mental health, who I can pick up the phone to and not actually say anything, and they just look at my face, what's wrong? Well, she done all this, he done that, and okay, well, I'll write about it, and then I'll just unwrite it.
And that's important, because I say you've picked up a few good points there on how other people can help. So there's that consistency. And I think it's very important not to judge. And I think it's very easy for us to see the world through our eyes and potentially look at behavior and just be judging people on the basis of behavior. But actually, I think what others can do to help a loved one who has EUPD, the first thing you can do is do your research, understand what it's about. And I think not enough people do that. We have Google. You can go onto Google and you can find out the facts, and that gives a foundation of knowledge. And then you can ask the person. Don't assume that you can't ask the person what they're going through. Ask them to explain what it is that they go through when they're feeling these emotions. And that might give you a deeper empathy to then be able to think, wow, like, how would I feel if this was happening for me? But I do think the judgment, and you said consistency, so you're not dropping out and potentially explaining things. So some people may not need an explanation as to why you said no. But if you struggle with emotions, and particularly abandonment and rejection, you're going to internalize a lot of those no's. So a simple explanation could just make it so much easier for that person. Before I wrap this up, Kerry, because it's been quite a long one, but I just want to say thank you for sharing so much of what you shared. But just going back to the things that I was saying at the beginning, if you think you may be suffering from a personality disorder and you may have been diagnosed with depression, but you still don't think that's it, go and seek a second opinion. And enough people don't seek a second opinion. So you may have been diagnosed with bipolar, but any mental health condition that you feel doesn't really fit because you are the expert, go back and get a different opinion, because the so-called experts get it wrong a lot of the time. And the expert on this podcast is not me, it's Kerry. And she shared so much. So once again, when we're looking at emotionally unstable.
And that might be a habit that I've taught so much tonight, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get off there. I'm like, oh, I didn't stick to what I was going to say.
It's okay, because
carried away with everything.
No. Sticking to formats sometimes just leads you into something rigid. Instead, it's become something a lot more dynamic. So you've shared with us your early attachments, which were difficult and had abuse. We've looked at some of the traumatic experiences that happened on top of that. So not just the abuse, but the care home, seeing your parents, the police, which I can't emphasize enough, as understanding that your mum had depression and had some elements of self-harm. So I've mentioned it before. If you have a parent that's suffering from mental illness, it may be that you're more likely because you learn some of those behaviors. We looked at some of the difficulties that is presented in your relationships. You've had marriages and a lot of abuse, not really understanding yourself, waiting a long time. So from the 70s, 80s, 90s, not getting a diagnosis until 2004. But for me, what's the most inspiring is that even though people are still determined to try to put this label on you, you are determined that you're not a label, you're Kerry. And that's something that you say to me all the time.
I am not my label. I'm my label to the system. I'm my label. They labeled me that. I can never remove it. It doesn't matter. I can never remove it. And I will admit that at the end of the day, sometimes I question, am I my label today? I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I guess and then I'll just give in to that. I guess I'm my label today. That's the truth. That's how I'm feeling. And now I need to look at the reason why and what I can implement to keep myself safe, what I can do tomorrow in a positive light to replace the negative thing. The other thing to just wanted to pick up with, where's my life turned around slightly to better, was that fight for my life once more. I was determined, you're not taking my life. I'm not letting another perpetrator strip me from my life, and the justice system caused me injustice. So I fought back the system. And for all of those rogue landlords or state agencies or the councils or the housing association, all of those people that cause injustice and along with mental health services, who I can't trust, by the way, I lost trust. I lost trust in their work. So when you don't put things right, why would I return to somebody that caused more trauma to me? And I will always remember that. So that's another suffering where I think, oh God, I know when it's
yeah, and that can be
talking to people that get me and understand me, and that gives me permission to just be real. I turned my life around by helping others. It helped me. So identifying their behavior, their pattern, their coping strategy, their suffering, their neglect. That's just what the system are doing to them. I decided to stand in unity with people that were vulnerable and suffering. And I decided to advocate for the community in mental health. And you can look at the word safeguard, and my word would be, how can you, this man's suffering or this woman is suffering, and it's because of this. You had to do youth care under the Equality Act 2010. And I started fighting back on people's rights, and definitely mine included. And then I decided to, when I got compensation for those things, I just thought, you can never call me an idiot again because I've sued you and I've won. And so don't blame it on my mental health. Don't blame it on your behavior, and allowing people to suffer and suffer in silence. So I say, don't suffer in silence. Speak out, for speaking out saves lives, and allow people to support you through. And if you're not fluid with their needs, find somebody who is experienced in their needs. So if it's a housing issue or whatever, get that opinion, get the advice on it, because the housing can be the be all and end all of someone's life.
It can be a trigger, a big trigger. But you've helped a lot, and I think there are a lot of people that will resonate with you, because often we don't see the people behind the labels, and I think that is what's damaging. people, they have these preconceptions about mental health, and it's not until they meet some people that are going through an invisible disability that they actually see the struggle. So the next time someone tells you that they have an emotionally unstable personality disorder, I hope that the first thing that comes to your mind is not judgment. I hope the first thing that comes to your mind is that person may have experienced some terrible things that think yourself fortunate that you've not had to go through, because by the grace of God go I. So it's something that can happen to anyone. So for today, guys, we're going to leave it there, but I want Kerry to have the final word. Thank you so much for coming on. Remind everyone where they can find you.
So there is a platform that I see, I'm not in this for me. There is a platform for all the world that you can do some encouraging messages, quotes, inspiration things. Please try not to promote the method of how somebody tried to take their life or whatever, because you put that in somebody's head. And just because you think they're good on the outside, I remember what they said. This is how you do it. To be mindful with your words when you are advertising. Spread love, not hate. Do encouragement and keep a boundary. But really have a plan, get a calendar, date yourself, be kind to yourself, nurture yourself, and don't let anyone say that you are nothing, because you're everything.
You're less than. Yeah.
For me, if you don't have a belief, I would say you are people walking around you. They come at the right time, right opportunities, and the right things, and they're not sent by chance. Listen to that spiritual guide, that consciousness that says, this is not a good idea, or this is a good idea. So just don't neglect one another.
Yeah.
Speaking
So
of friends, life and support, thanks more. And
she's the founder of Mind Over Matter, suicide prevention, and Kerry's a member of a lot more groups on the Facebook. So feel free to check her out. So that's Kerry Mussington, Mind Over Matter, which you will find on Facebook. But for now, guys, Kerry's out, Lee's out, and Tap's out. Catch you next time. I haven't quite decided what we're going to do just yet. I might throw a little spanner into the works and do a freestyle. This is what I need, guys. I need you guys to like, share, and subscribe. If you like what you hear, share it with 5 people, because the more people hear this message, the more people can start identifying stuff in themselves and maybe getting the help that they so desperately need. Like Kerry said, it's not about me or her. It's about we both share a vision, and that vision is to improve the mental health of many people, because there's so many things out there that people are struggling with. So for now, guys, Lee's out, Kerry's out, and Tap's out, and we'll catch you next time on the Alphabet Podcast.